Okay, welcome to Thinking Green. We're here remotely today, and I'm joined by Jean Jordan, who is the president of the New London chapter of the NAACP, and Nicole Thomas, who is, I don't know, you're one of the administrators for Connecticut Landmarks, which includes in New London our very old, very own Hempsted House property. And for probably about a decade, along with OIC and some other organizations, these two groups have worked together for Juneteenth uh, weekend, lots of activities together. And we're going to talk about that because this weekend is when it's all happening. So, welcome, Jean. Welcome, Nicole. And I'm going to start, as I almost always do. If each of you can talk a little bit about how you became involved in the organizations that you're representing here tonight. And I don't know, do you want to start, Jean?
I think I am a legacy.
Yeah, you were born into it, I think.
Wait, this version of the branch started in 1956, and my great uncle, who was also kind of my godfather, my uncle Luke LaOverture Harris, was the first vice president of the branch. And then just about everyone who is on the charter of the original branch were relatives, close family friends, another godmother, my great aunt Nanny Bland. So it was family and friends.
Yeah.
As you know, in the 60s, during the height of the civil rights movement, my cousin Linwood Bland was the president for many years.
Well, and I worked with your mom back in the early 1980s at Home
Yeah,
Street Daycare Center, and she was quite active at that time.
yes. TVCCA.
Yes, it was interesting times.
Yes, it was. Yes,
So,
it was.
Nicole, how did you get started in the Connecticut landmarks and preservation in general?
Yeah, so I got involved quite a bit ago. I've been with Connecticut Landmarks for about 7 years now. I am currently the assistant site administrator for the Southeast region of Connecticut Landmarks. The way that I got involved in the organization actually came actually kind of between my both of my jobs. So I know a lot of people here are familiar with Barbara Nagy, who used to run the Hempsted houses. Barbara and I actually worked at Homeward Bound Treasures downtown New London, which was run by the New London Homeless Hospitality Center, where I still work today as their human resource manager. And Barbara kept hearing me talk about a lot of the local history. She knew Aileen Novick for over at the Hempsted houses, and she was going over and just discussing with her how there was this girl who worked at Homeward Bound and that she knew a lot of local history. So I was actually invited to come to a Juneteenth celebration back in 2018. And when I got there, I was able to just kind of go through the house, give people kind of like mini tours for the celebration. We don't give full tours on the Juneteenth holiday, but of course, right now our house is currently closed for restoration for at least the next month and some change, maybe. And so Aileen kind of just pulled me in. She asked about if I would like to work at the house after I came down for Juneteenth. I said yes, and it's been 7 years. I haven't walked away since. The house just captivated me. The stories captivated me, and our audience captivated me. So that's why I'm there, and that's why I stay.
Now, what would you say, and we'll go in reverse order this time, the main mission of and the main programming of Connecticut landmarks and specifically the Hempstead houses here in New London?
I would say for us, our main programming is focusing on the Black community, just primarily because we had Adam Jackson, who was enslaved at our property for a period of 30 years. Adam's story to me is one of resilience, one of strength, and of course, of legacy. Many people know that there was a 30-year court case involving the Jackson family and the Rogers family, and just detailing who exactly owned Joan Jackson, Adam's mother. And so for us, it's more about community. We are right in the hub of a historic Black neighborhood, which is on Hempsted Street. And as a lot of us know, the New London Black Heritage Trail encompasses a lot of those sites. So for me, it was really Adam and Adam's story. A lot of our other Connecticut landmarks properties encompass different things that go out throughout the house, but we do talk about that legacy of slavery throughout our Connecticut landmarks. All of the organization, we have that level of discussion. But for me, it was Adam's story, that neighborhood, and they are deeply, deeply ingrained in Adam's legacy and the legacy of the home.
And, I'm from Philadelphia, so it's still the Northeast. And of course, when I was going to school in the 1950s and 60s, it's like slavery. That was, a Southern problem, but it wasn't. And it's, white history, actually more than Black history. I think Black history is more about the resilience after the, generations of enslavement and actually the idea of having a system of slavery is kind of white history.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. I mean, I would absolutely agree with that. I think when we look at this nation and the way that it's been formed, a lot of the stories that we have left behind, a lot of the legacies, and you have to think about it. The way we think about history today is not the same as we read it in books, right? Like a lot of the times, African American families, we got our history and our legacy from our grandparents, our aunts, our grandfathers, that those things were passed down. But you won't see a lot of those things in history books. And that is what is sad to me. So I think the history that we do, that Jean does, and I mean, let me be very clear about the fact that Jean's been teaching me Black history since I was a child. That was something that, as my teacher as well, was never lit up on. So I knew from a very, very young age that there was strength in humanity and agency, and just excellence excellence in Black history, and that it didn't all have to be about, slavery and chains and things of that nature. And we did think about, how slavery had happened to do more with the South at that time. I am still to this day having conversations with people who do not believe that slavery happened in the North or are just finding out about it. And they're pretty distraught when they find that out because we do think about it as a Southern thing. But those of us who are doing the work in the background or even on the forefront are really working hard to make sure that that history of slavery in the North is not lost or forgotten, but that we also have a long history of strength and resilience, and just powerful excellence. I think that's really important to point out.
And the history is coming to light, but not quickly. I mean, it's with a lot of effort, and it's like a new piece all the time. And I'm sure there are more pieces to be uncovered, but it seems like a long, arduous, but pretty rewarding process. So, Jean, do you want to talk a little bit about the NAACP in this area over the many decades?
Okay, our local branch, the New London branch, was started in 1956. As I said before, it started by a lot of members of my family and close friends of the family. My great uncle was the first vice president of the branch. My cousin Linwood Bland was the president for many years. The one thing about the New London branch I can say is that we have had most branches you look at, they have men leading them. New London has started off with a woman leading it. We went to a few men. We went back to the women leading it again. And that's something the whole Eastern Connecticut, the branches have been predominantly run by women. New London, Norwich, and Willimantic. The New London branch was formed through the New Britain branch. And we in turn helped form the Norwich branch, who in turn has helped reform the Willimantic branch. So we work with each other closely. And we are a civil rights organization. A lot of times people come to us with complaints that are not civil rights. It's not a social organization. It's not a human services organization. It's a civil rights organization. And people don't understand that sometimes the complaint they have is not a violation of their civil rights. It has nothing to do with their civil rights. So we try and make that known. We are also not lawyers. And if you have a lawyer, we will do what the lawyer asks, but there's only so much we can do.
And now the Youth Council has for several years been a big part of what the local branch does.
Right. I came back on as a youth advisor, and I was a youth advisor for, I think, like 15 years. I can say one of my youth is now the head of the guidance department at Benny Dover Jackson Middle School.
Wow.
So we have youth all over. local youth within southeastern Connecticut from the Norwich branch is Darrell Wilson, who is a state representative for Norwich. So we love our youth. We love working with our youth, and we train our youth differently from most youth organizations because we are a national organization, and there are certain rules and regulations that we have to follow.
And while you're talking about, well, the different branches, and we've talked a little bit about getting the history out, it was in the paper very recently that one of the Norwich branch people, Tamara Lanier,
Actually, she's a New London branch person.
oh, I didn't know. Well, I
She's
knew
our
she.
former first vice president.
Yeah,
Norwich and New London, we kind of overlap.
and she has been engaged in a battle with Harvard to get, well, over owner who owns their history.
Right.
And it was just in the paper, I don't know, a week ago, that there was a settlement, a resolution after many years. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Tamara started this journey back in 2010 when a friend of hers, she had been discussing her family history, found the pictures, the daguerreotypes of Rente, and told her where they were at. She and her daughter then went to Harvard to a symposium they had, and lo and behold, there it was. She started contacting them and telling them, I know the history of Rente. He is my great 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 grandfather. They basically blew her off. So, yeah, no, it's not true. In 2017, she met Ben Crump, and he said, I think this is worth taking the case. And he, along with, I just went blank, Michael Koskoff from Koskoff Law Firm in Bridgeport, who is also a well known civil rights attorney here in the state of Connecticut, um, he took the case with him. And that came about because Michael Koskoff and his son, who is a screenwriter, wrote the movie Marshall.
Oh,
And Bing Crump and Trayvon Martin's mother were in the final scenes of that movie. And Ben tells the story how on the set he talked to Michael about this case. And he needed a lawyer in Connecticut also to help. So the Koskoff family became involved. And if you read the original documents that Michael Koskoff wrote, it is a document that all history teachers should have a copy of. And it just goes through the history of enslaved people from Africa to this country. It's a masterpiece that he wrote. And we're sorry, he wasn't able to be a part of the case because he passed away not long after they started the trial. But his son Josh, who has also become very well known as a Sandy Hook lawyer, he's an attorney for the people up in Buffalo, New York, and also Texas now. He took over the case, he and his staff, and they did a remarkable job along with Ben on going after Harvard because Harvard is an entity where people feel they're untouchable. Well, guess what? They're not. And it was an African American female who touched them. And what she asked for, she is getting. And that was for the daguerreotypes to go to someplace other than Harvard where they could be seen. So they are going, Rente is going back home to South Carolina. The ancestors are happy.
yeah, and that was a very long battle, but I wonder if we'll be seeing a lot more of that because the universities in this country, well, not just here, but in Europe as well, have been displaying artifacts that are stolen, uh, yeah, forever.
I hope so. Some universities have taken it on, like Brown University has taken it on, and they're not hiding anything. Georgetown University, most people don't realize the money for Georgetown University came from plantations that were owned in Virginia. So what they have done is that descendants from those plantations can go to Georgetown for free. And as we know, the case of Dartmouth University was founded by Uncas was founded by the Mohegans. So, it's some universities are doing the right thing, whereas others are trying to hide their history. But you know what? You can't hide it but for so long because it will come out.
And we're seeing that happening.
Right. But on the other hand, we still have to support Harvard in their other battle against the government, because if we don't support them with that, that's going to trickle down to all universities, including the HBCUs. So we have to support them in that,
Yeah,
even though we
we are
don't in the
living in
other.
very scary times when you think about just free speech and I think all kinds of research might be threatened as
It is.
part of
And
this.
as far as free speech goes, people don't realize you have the right to have free speech, but there are some consequences to your speech.
Right,
And but what we're seeing now is consequences that should not happen.
right. Uh, Now, so Juneteenth is coming up. It has fairly recently become a federal and a state holiday. It took New London a couple years to get it straight. I was looking back at 2 years ago, I believe. Uh, it was publicized that on June 19th was a Monday, that city offices were all closed, but city council had a meeting. It's like there was confusion. I think we've kind of figured out that it
But
really,
I think at that city council meeting, they did also honor and recognize Juneteenth.
they did. So does either of you want to talk about the background of, Juneteenth and why historically this is something that we have to remember, well, every year and between times too?
Give Jean the floor.
Well, we started our Juneteenth. There's been more than one version of Juneteenth in New London. Kente Cultural Center did Juneteenth for many, many years, and they did it extremely well. And they did it downtown New London. They did it on Black Hall Street. One year they did do it at OIC. And then once Kente closed down, it didn't happen for a few years. And it was Barbara who started talking about wanting to do Juneteenth. And our secretary at the time knew Barbara from the Homeless Hospitality Center and from Homeward Bound Treasures. And he came to me and he said, "What do you think about this? Should we get involved? They want to do this." And we were like, "Let's go for it." So the first year it was the Hempsted houses, the NAACP, and Lawrence Memorial Hospital.
Hmm.
They were the first year. The second year, OIC came on board. And since that time, since the third year, it's been OIC, the Hempsted houses, and the NAACP.
So,
And we do it in Hempsted Street because, as Nicole said earlier, that is the historic Black neighborhood.
yeah, all those small houses that go curve around the hill were all owned by free Black families, correct?
Correct. And Nicole can talk a little bit probably about Civilian Haley, who built those houses.
Oh, that
Yeah.
would be great.
Yeah, no, Haley was a painter by trade. He actually also was involved in the famous Amistad case. But what is important to me about Civilian Haley is that he not only built those houses for free Blacks, and sold them at cost, but the land itself was actually worth that $700, let's say, around that fee. And that's the number that we typically stick with. That could be either today or off, on or off a little bit by the today's figures. But when you think about that, the fact that the land itself was worth $700 and he built those houses and still sold them at cost to free Blacks, where he could have charged for the land and the houses. Civilian Haley to me is one of my personal history heroes. Along with Increase Wilson, with which a lot of people don't know a lot about him, but I know that he actually refused to make shackles for slaves and was from here in New London. But Civilian Haley to me is one of those people where when you think about it, the land that he purchased, and it was purchased from the Hempsted, sold to another man, and then that man actually sold it to Civilian Haley. Now, whether or not he knew that this is exactly what he was going to do, I'm not entirely sure, and actually further research is required for that. But it's interesting to me that he built and sold those houses at cost to free Blacks when the land itself was worth $700. Amazing to me how he did that. And he was in the fight for abolition. Like I said, he had a lot to do with the Amistad case, which I won't go deeply into today. But wow, like powerful stuff to understand the sacrifices that were made for that neighborhood, the sacrifices that were made for those people in that neighborhood. Today, we do know that Civilian Haley's name is on all of the properties over there. But what we are trying to also do, and seeing if we're able to get this done at some point, is to put the names of some of the famous people, today famous people that would have owned those houses at the time. One of which is connected to, and we're going to hear a lot about this coming up, famed freedom fighter who actually gave his start to Frederick Douglass, which is David Ruggles. My friend Tom Schick talks about that quite a bit as well. But David Ruggles, that whole neighborhood, the people that had lived there, his sister Lavinia Ruggles actually lived in one of those houses. Spencer Lancaster, who Gene is related to as well, lived in one of those houses for a period of his life. I mean, to span from those colonial days, Sarah Cheney as well. Yep, thank you for that. Our powerhouse people here in New London, Connecticut, were able to own and operate those houses, live in those homes. And it's all thanks to that one figure, Civilian Haley, who was in the fight for freedom against slavery and abolition with us. And that, to me, is a measure of a true ally.
I think they said that the properties, total cost of all the properties and building them was $3,000.
There you go. There you go. So, I mean, to do something like that at a time when it was not popular, people were not doing things like that. Haley gets a nudge in my personal New London history hero book, for sure. 1,000%.
Now, since you started talking about that strip of houses, do you want to talk a little bit about the Heritage Trail in New London, which is something that, I don't know, when did that come to be? About 5-6 years ago?
So, oops, sorry, go ahead.
You were very involved in it, so yes, go for it.
Yeah, no, I was. And so we actually unveiled all of this during the pandemic, and two things were happening at the same time. When I tell you, I think it was like kismet and it just came together the way it was supposed to. What a beautiful feeling. It started kind of with Tom Shook and Felix Reyes from the city which Tom is a historian as well, so one of my professional colleagues. Tom and Felix were having one conversation because the story started with Ichabod Pease and how he started a school for Black children at the age of 81. Fascinating man, fascinating history. And then Curtis Goodwin and Curtis was actually running for city council at the time and came to me to ask me to work on his campaign, be the secretary. I thought Curtis was crazy and had lost his mind. I'm like, me? What are you talking about? And then kind of organically, he came down and he starts coming down to Homeward Bound Treasures. I'm telling him about all this regular history of New London, the colonial history. I'm telling him about the Black history that I know about New London. And Tom was given a presentation through New London Landmarks, and I asked Curtis to come to that presentation. He wasn't entirely sure he was going to be able to make it, but then he decided he could. So he comes down, and we're given this, Tom Shook and Mary Lycan are given this talk, and my children and I are in the audience. I think half of New London that night was in the audience. I remember very specifically them trying to keep
St. James?
It was at St. James.
I think I was standing in the back, I think, because it was standing room only.
It was standing room only, yeah. And I remember very specifically not thinking Curtis had made it and not seeing him in the back of the room until all of a sudden a hand popped out in the back and waved at me. And so noticing that he was there, and he was like flabbergasted by all of the news and the information. And he's like, why didn't I know about this? Why didn't anybody teach us this growing up? And so it unfolded pretty organically from that point on. Started with Ichabod Pease's plaque. Then I get a call from Laura Natush from New London Landmarks, who was the executive director at the time. And they wanted me to be a part of this research project, in which they gave me Adam Jackson and the Negro Governors. Fascinating group of people, myself, Lonnie Braxton, Tom Shook, and Laura Natush, and of course Curtis and Felix, helping with things in the background. Amazing efforts by everybody, during which time I actually found out that Lonnie Braxton is related to me too. So it was a pretty interesting thing to come on there and find that all of a sudden, because we're not from the same space, originally, but I'm from New London. And so we were able to do that. And we started out, the city had asked if we had any other plaques, any other things that we could put together. I think Tom said we started with about 30 and we whittled it down to about 15. I think we're on 20 plaques at this particular point. So we have things that span from the colonial period, from Robert Jacklin owning property here in New London, down in Pikes Hollow, which is over by the park on Vauxhall Street, to Adam Jackson being enslaved at the Hempsted houses for 30 years, the Negro Governors. Spencer Lancaster actually has his own plaque. He was able to be there at the unveiling, and then he passed away. I think, Gene, it was last year?
Yes.
That Mr. Lancaster passed away. But he was able to be there on the unveiling of the plaques for the Black Heritage Trail. And then we moved it to Hempsted Street. But we have, 73 Hempsted Street is actually just by the name of the property because so much happened in that house. And people constantly ask me, well, what is your favorite site on the Black Heritage Trail? And I always tell them it is Hempsted Street.
Yes.
Just the entire street. There's no way to whittle that down from the Hempsted houses right up to the ancientest burial ground, right around the corner where Prudence Crandall's student, Sarah Harris of Fairweather, actually lived at 90 Broad Street. So that is a big plug on the trail. Frederick Douglass actually gave 4 anti-slavery speeches at Darts Hall, where you can find that plaque actually behind the old, I have to say now, the former New London Day building down there on one of the streets that still exists. A portion of Atlantic Street still exists back there. So many different plaques, so many different stories that spans over 300 years. And I have to tell you, even though we're not, still actively working the way that we used to work, we're nowhere near done. I think every plaque that we open up leads to another plaque that needs to be told, another story that needs to be told.
I'm not surprised. And I'm going to share the screen because I did, I think, if I can find it, make a slide. No, that isn't the right one, or is it? Maybe it is.
The Heritage Trail,
Yeah,
it is.
It is good. Yeah, and I wanted to share that, if you look around the map, it's, the plaques are concentrated in that one Hempsted Street area, the Freedom Trail neighborhood. But to be honest, the influence trickled throughout the whole city.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. We had, like I said, Spencer Lancaster's property is a little bit of an outlier. There are some that are. You can go all the way down to the Amistad Pier, and the Amistad plaque is there. We also have a Middle Passage plaque, and then if you go up on State Street, Sarah Cheney's plaque is over there. There's one that goes to William and Celinda Harris that's also on Huntington Street. So we're kind of all over the place. Stories that are being told from, again, and it doesn't just span to what's in New London. People come from all over the place, so it's really, really important to bring those things out. And there's also the Hotel Bristol on Bank Street, which talks about the 1919 race riots as well. And that's one of the times that some of my family members had already been here for a number of years and had spanned, some length of time. But the race riots are a pivotal point in New London's history and actually in everybody's history because that was Red Summer. So fights and things like that and all kinds of race riots were happening all over the place. So it's really important to point out the impact of all of these things that were happening because you know what they say, if you hide things in a book, if you want to hide things from people, you put it in a book. I don't want to say a lot of people aren't reading anymore, but I think we are so inundated with social news, anything on our social media feeds, and we don't all get the same information like we would have in grade school. So how much of a blessing is it that we get to share these things publicly at national conferences? We actually shared at the slave dwelling conference, our story for the New London's Black Heritage Trail for the first time on a national stage. I mean, who would have thought that 4 people working on some plaques from New London, Connecticut would have a national audience? And we've been able to span that and do multiple programs that discuss that as well. Another thing that's really important about the Black Heritage Trail, and I don't have, too long to go into it, but the story about the Negro governors, which I'm sure we maybe can link in YouTube or something like that. But it's really, really important because people don't think about the fact that yes, these things maybe started as small offices, and yes, they started as subtle means of slave control. However, the Negro governors were able to make their own way out of a lot of things. So we think back to conversations about like taxation without representation or voting rights and things of that nature. That kind of came out of the office of the Negro governors because that was something that happened kind of in a more concentrated, Southeast region on some scale. It did span a little bit further. But we need to tell those stories. We really need to think about those things. Where and when did we get the right to vote? Who was behind the fights for justice and things like that? Some of those things came out of some of those subtle offices. And I think when you don't know your history, you are absolutely bound to repeat it. And we don't want to see those same things happen again.
And a lot of the New London Black history is written down. People just don't know where to look. If you look at Black Roots in Southeastern Connecticut and Tapestry by James Rose, he tells all those stories.
Yes, he does.
Everything is in there. I know myself, I grew up with a mother and a grandfather who told those stories. My grandfather came in 1913. So some people were still around when he came. They talked about Alex Haley when he was here in the Coast Guard. Anton Desant. We always would talked about every time we went past his house on Bank Street. The story my mother told me was that's where Mr. Bush lives. Mr. Bush played the organ in the World's Fair. So the
Wow.
information was out there. It's just not everyone knew it
This is true.
because
Very,
it's
very
told by
true.
the families. The families who were here, the families who were involved knew it.
And of course, because we don't all read as much as we used to or should, a lot of people still don't know it. You mentioned that you have spoken to like national audiences around it. Are there other cities that have kind of emulated what's happened in New London in terms of, making that history come more alive for the people, who are living there now?
There are some cities, I don't know that I can name them specifically, but there are a lot of places that have asked us how we did what we did. And for me, it's really, I don't even know how to put that into words, honestly. To be a part of something where other people are asking you, wow, how did you did it? How did you do it? And if we wanted to do this, how could we get started? Is a beautiful thing. Like I said, we were able to do that at the Slave Dwelling Conference. I don't know how many people were in attendance, but that is on YouTube. It lives on YouTube now. There were bunches and bunches of people at the conference. I actually went to the Slave Dwelling Conference this year in Philadelphia, last year, I'm sorry, October of last year. And that was my first time actually getting a chance to go around there. But I noticed how rich of a heritage they have. We were able to do a really great walking tour down there as well. And just to see other places like, Boston and Newport and just these places that have these trails out there and are doing their thing to tell these stories. What a great time to be a historian. What a great time to be able to tell these things and to uncover things like Jean said. There are things that are in Black Roots. They did an amazing job of that at the time that they did it. But there's still new information to be uncovered. And so every time I get a chance or if I give a talk or something, I tell people, I don't care if you get a chance to go through letters in your attic, if your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, you're cleaning things out, you don't know what type of a treasure trove you could be missing. So I think it's important for people to know that not all old documents are just old things to throw away. They are very, very important. There was a company, sorry, not a company. There was a woman on Martha's Vineyard that was able to donate a journal that had been in her family, the only journal, and only was involved in the Prudence Crandall School. They was accused of starting and setting a fire, but it was his journal, the Merrimack Journal, that actually came back here. And thank goodness that woman thought, instead it had been in her family for so many years, she was able to actually donate that to our custom house. A bunch of people during the pandemic were able to transcribe that and look at how much more we know versus what we knew in the beginning. We had little to no information or knowledge about that. And now we've gained so much more, all from somebody looking in their family heirlooms and saying, hey, this might belong to somebody else or might be worth it for somebody else.
Wow.
It goes back to tell your family history. It goes back to what with Tamara Lanier. Her mother told the story. Her mother told the story. That story came down from generations. Every generation had a rente in their family, so they knew that generation. Her daughter, as a child, elementary school student, wrote it down and shared it with her family. They still have that. That was evidence. So it's, the history is there. You just have to know where to look. And a lot of times our history is not written in the ledgers the way you would think they were. They're written on manifests and property transcripts. And that's where you go to find our history, I'm sorry to say.
That's true. Very, very true. And if I can just add that one more thing to that, Jean is absolutely correct in saying that, and this is why I tell people, talk to your grandparents, talk to your kids. But a lot of us, like I listened to my noni a lot when I was younger. There are some stories that I have passed down, but some of the generations, there was this, not necessarily a shame about those things, but really about not wanting to talk. And there are some generations that didn't want to have those conversations about slavery in the past. And I think it's really important that we do those things and have those conversations, primarily because, again, if they're not written down, I myself have faced a lot of people just doing genealogy and asking, well, how can you prove that, from people that know full well we don't have the burden of proof. We don't have the burden of proof to bear. We don't have those documents, those pieces of documentation. And sometimes nobody's ever told us. I myself, at 40 years of age or younger, actually, because I just turned 40, but I myself have been able to tell a number of members of my family. I was able to jog my mother's memory about an aunt she had forgotten lived with her until she was 7. If I didn't pull those things up, get into those archives, and for lack of a better term, get nosy about it and say, I really need to know where I come from so I know where I'm going and where I lead my children, that could have all been lost to history, and very, very easily, because we do face now, and I'm sure the two of you can agree. I know when I was growing up, I knew all my cousins. I talked to everybody in my family. I knew who everybody was. I noticed that my kids today don't have that same existence. So if we're not talking, we're losing valuable information.
And I think you remember, Nicole, when we took our little ride over to Westerly, because
Yes, I do.
Nicole didn't know that family members had lived in Westerly.
Wow.
So I was able to take her over and show her the neighborhood where our family members lived in Westerly.
And from that, I was able to find my great great grandmother at the cemetery up there in Riverbend. So
Yep.
I didn't know where they were buried. I didn't know any of that. I knew my nanny had lived in Westerly as a kid, but I didn't know about anybody else. I didn't know. I mean, and it's right. It's like at my doorstep. Westerly is not that far from us. So
Right.
really, our history is sometimes hidden right under our noses. And I think for Black Americans, especially the way I see it, I have looked at my own DNA, my own ties to New London. And for me, I have to start from today and move backwards. But when it comes to the white side of my family, I have to move from back then and move here. And we bear that burden of having to do that because a lot of times people are not helping us look for that information, or they readily disprove it if they could. So for something like this, I think it's just important that people keep on talking.
Yeah, really. I do have a slide of what is happening at the Hempsted houses on Juneteenth. Let's see if I have there it is.
And I've been getting text messages from people asking, is Tamara going to be there? Tamara will be there. She will be there at 1:30 in the afternoon. She will have some books with her. Not a lot, but she will have some books there for signing.
That's
Nice.
awesome.
And she will be doing a presentation in OIC.
Now, what other activities are happening when? Because the everything is between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m., and it looks like there's quite a lot going on. What's
Yes.
happening? What?
Oh yeah, we have a lot of activities. So the runner show actually hasn't been put out publicly yet, but there are some of the things on our Facebook. So if people are wanting to look those things up, they're welcome to do so. I will say that you do not want to miss our keynote. That's going to be at 11 a.m. That is with John Mills. We do have Tammy Denise, who is going to be portraying Joan Jackson, who was Adam's mother. We have Joseph McGill also having the campfire conversation from 4 to 6. I believe it's 4 to 6 still. That is going to be one of those community conversations. And so we have all kinds of things going on, activities for the youth. Like Jean just mentioned, Tamara Lanier is also going to be doing a book talk. So it's scaled back a little bit from what we've done in the last previous years. Usually we do a 3-day celebration. This time it's been scaled back to the 1 day, which is actually I think is going to be better for this year because we get to have them all jam packed into one action packed, fun filled day. We'll have music and things in between. So it's going to be a really fascinating day, and I hope people come out and just enjoy the celebration.
Now, because you mentioned Joseph McGill, he's come in the past too. Do you want to talk a little bit about what he's doing with this slave dwelling project?
Yeah, so Joe's been traveling a lot. It would pain me to try to keep up with the itinerary. I am still trying to figure out how in the world he does it. But Joe, if a lot of people are not familiar with what Joseph McGill does and have never heard of the slave dwelling project, in a short overview, what Joseph McGill does is essentially go around the country and sleep in the places that the enslaved people had slept in previously, which is why he comes to Hempsted houses because of Adam Jackson's enslavement there. So Joe also puts on a yearly national conference called the Slave Dwelling Conference, which like I mentioned earlier, I went to last year in Philadelphia. And Lynette, my boss, actually went to it the year prior in South Carolina. So he moves it around. He actually was able to do it this time for the first time in a northern state. And it was actually pretty poignant because people do, again, believe in the North that we did not have slavery up here. So Joe is able to go around and do that for people. And again, you think about Mount Vernon, you think about Monticello, and you think about the big house. When you think about plantation style houses, you think about the big house. You think about the people that are wearing the ball gowns and are able to go out and are prominent people. What we don't often think about in a lot of these homes, and there's not a lot of them that still exist, on a lot of properties, and some of them have been torn down in the cover of night because people did not want others on their property or for them to know about a slave cabin or something like that. But Joe goes around and he basically stays in places where the enslaved people slept so that they are not forgotten. I did not get to sleep at the property while we were in Philadelphia, but there were plenty of places that Joe has been, and I plan to follow him for another sleepover. We've actually slept here in New London at the Hempsted houses a number of times, and we also slept at the Shaw Mansion one of the years as well, because Caesar and Cecilia Shaw were also enslaved over there. So Joe can only count a house one time, and we were able to go to the Shaw Mansion to get something else to count as well. So Joe has been instrumental in a lot of the things that I've been doing in the last few years, and we are just so happy to have him every time he shows up for us. We are really excited.
Yeah.
We forget Joe is not from New London.
No, he's not. Joe's from South Carolina.
And he travels around, though, it sounds like.
He travels quite a bit. He is everywhere all the time doing the thing. And actually, he's been joined pretty recently by Tammy Denise. If you see there, actually in the historic clothing there, she is the one who portrays Joan Jackson, Adam Jackson's mother. And Joan Jackson, I have such a love for that woman, because she was able to give birth to all of her children, and despite the evils of slavery, keep most of her family together. And even when they were sold off, Adam's father, John Jackson, actually was fighting for his family and going through that court case historically for a period of 30 years. And I can't imagine what Joan had to do leaving her children behind, especially Adam and Miriam, who were her first two children, Adam being the oldest, and then her daughter Miriam. I mean, they were on the Fox family farm, which is not too far from us, but they were part of the Rogers clan. And if you guys know the Rogers thing, you think about that Conn College area, you have the Rogers Bowles family, which was really, really fascinating. But Joan would have to go and leave her children on that Fox family farm. She would go to nurse them. And I have two daughters myself. I could not imagine having to leave them there. And it must have been a really difficult thing for Joan as well, considering a lot of the historic records, she's mentioned as a mulatto woman. So obviously she had a lighter tone. She could have looked like me. She may have had any, level of tone there, but she did definitely have to leave her kids. And we believe that she was part of the Rogers family by blood, because the way she's listed in the records. But Tammy will be portraying Joan Jackson and telling us all her story. So I really hope people don't miss that. She comes back every year, and we get to reach a new audience every single time she comes. So we love that, and we can't wait for people to come out and see this again.
Yeah, that is fascinating to me, because the Rogers and Bowles family, they were Rogerines.
Yes, they were.
Yes.
Bob is actually descended from Whipples, who were Rogerines as well. But she found out relatively recently, way after we moved to the East Coast. He grew up in Oregon. His parents were both born in Oregon, but there was a branch of that family that moved down to the Texas, New Orleans, and some members of that clan moved from Louisiana and Texas up to Oregon. So he found out that he has, Rogerine blood and some indigenous from, I don't know, I don't remember what tribe, but it was through some Rhode Island connection.
Well, Rhode Island
never found that out.
Answer.
It could be, yeah. It's fascinating, because we moved to Connecticut not having any idea that his family had any connection at all with New England, and yet they did. So,
and the Rogerines moved from New London. Some of them moved to New Jersey. So I wonder if the New Jersey ones moved, then in turn moved down to Texas.
Well, that could be. There are like people with the Stuller name I haven't seen it in New Jersey so much, but in central Pennsylvania and Maryland, there are other Stullers, and I don't know how the pieces all fit together, but it's quite fascinating how much many relatives he probably has in at least the middle Atlantic states and in the New London, Quaker Hill area.
Yeah, it is. It's hard when you think about it. When you look back at the history that we have, because I have not confirmed most of this. So it's not like my gospel truth, right? Like it's not something, but I looking back in like more scientific methods, I've been into like GEDmatch and saw New London pop up in like the 1640s, the 1650s. And I'm like, I got to figure that out, because it's funny. Most of my family are from the North Carolina, Virginia area, but a lot of us, somebody ended up here to begin with. And not my great grandfather, my mother's father, my grandfather actually came up here to New London because he had an aunt that was here and had been living here, and she'd come up years prior. But what made her come here, I'll never know. I will never know. And maybe I'll find out eventually down the line, but it just makes you think that, and it reminds us that we're more connected than we think we are, and we're more alike than we are different. And I think that's the most important part. I really do.
Now, moving beyond the events of this weekend, I noticed that the Hempstead houses are also hosting activities for Make Music Day. June is a big month, and I think I did. Let's see if I have that Make Music Day thing. Is that one? I think this one might be it. Um, so, what's planned for that? That's like a couple days later.
Yes, definitely a couple days later. And it's always, we do have a very busy month in June. Yeah, so Make Music Day, we have a couple artists, and I'm trying to keep a little bit of the names under wraps for right now for the things that we have coming up. Usually I put those out there. But we do have some things coming up. We were looking into playing some music from Sonny Freeman, who was actually somebody who was enslaved, had written some music and had it composed. And actually we were able to go so dealing with the Witness Stones project, we were able to actually, they had that, it was published, and we were actually able to hear some of it for the first time played out loud at the ethnic studies class for Linda actually Pfeiffer, who is actually a Hempstead that I grew up with at the high school. So we were able to get some of that music out. So we really just want to focus on like freedom, resilience, that type of music, and just see what the community can get out of it. And I think it's fitting that it happens there on Hempstead Street at the Hempstead houses. It's going to be a fascinating event. I think even if we don't, get a big audience, which I hope we do, because Make Music Day is national, right? Like it's everywhere.
Yeah.
The whole country is playing music on that day. So even if we don't have a huge audience, we're still going to have a really great time, and we're going to play music that permit just like the freedom songs and the struggle and thinking of the things that we've been through in the past. And so hopefully we'll get a lot of good people to come out for that.
And the one other event that I saw on the website was a housing panel. So what's that about?
So we want to have people kind of come out, and it's kind of somewhat of a community conversation, but also a panel discussion. We want people to come out and really talk about their history living in New London, Connecticut, how they were raised, where they see housing going, and what they think we can do to better some of these things. I know there's been a lot of talk about housing in New London, and we're also watching people kind of come in, build all these things, people who are not New Londoners, and that's not a problem for me on a large scale, but we like to see our own being kept here. I've watched family lose property over the years, specifically on Main Street down there by Riverside Park to urban renewal and things being kind of torn down. And some of our people that are going to be on that panel have lived through that and have witnessed a lot of those things, ebbs and flows and changes, or heard a lot about these things from their parents. A lot of us watched the whole, eminent domain struggle. We watched the Kilo versus New London unfold. And a lot of those properties and lands have been pulled from people, but not much done with them. Of course, we're seeing like the community center coming up now. So that's really a way to get the community involved, let them have a conversation, and just really get people's actual live memories and histories. I don't really want any of that extra professional stuff for that. I'm not saying it's not going to be a professional event, but what I don't want are the people that are sitting in the background having these already, answers that are going based on what we're talking about in offices behind closed doors. It's not that we disregard any of that, but for me and for the Hempstead houses, I really want to get the view of the New Londoners who have been here for ages, whose families have been here, people who have lost their homes and properties, or or had to been essentially forced out of the spaces that they're from due to a lack of housing. And I unfortunately see that we're having a lot of that same thing happen again. And so for me, it's more of a community conversation where I want people to be able to share their experience, strength, and hope, and be able to see where we've come from, but where we're going as well.
That sounds really interesting to me because I did not live in this area until the late 1970s, so I missed urban renewal. But I was in the area when Shaw Cove redevelopment happened, and of course, Fort Trumbull. And I could not help but notice that every time there are these large scale clearings of property for development, working class home ownership is destroyed. A lot of it black ownership disproportionately, but in general, it's the working class owner occupied neighborhoods that have gotten cleared out. And in none of these neighborhoods is there now owner occupied housing.
And it's interesting because you mentioned Shore Cove. I'm a Shore Street kid. My grandfather bought a house on Shore Street when it was predominantly Italian neighborhood, a few Jewish families, but it was an Italian neighborhood. And when you look at the Shore Street, Fort Trumbull area, it was Black and Italians who were
Yeah.
taken out in that. And as a friend used to always say, when did Italians become white? Because they were a minority when they first came to this country.
Yep. I'm Jewish, and at a certain point, Jews weren't always white, but at a certain point, got designated white. It's very bizarre.
Well, and there is also the dividing line that was in New London of Willits Avenue.
Yeah.
My father happened to live on the right side of Willits Avenue, not the wrong side, but the right side. So my aunt, who is 84 years old, went to Harbor School, where she was the only Black child.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
tease her about it because John McCain and she overlapped some years. She's like, but he was older than me.
that
But
is
she was like the only Black child because of where they lived at on Shore Street. She went to Harbor.
Yeah, and I know there were deed covenants that only the true whites were allowed to buy houses, down south end of town.
Yes.
Well, we have about 5 more minutes, and I wanted you, Jean, to talk about the Freedom Fund dinner coming up also this month, because
Yes.
that's been a very long tradition for NAACP here.
We changed it a little bit the last couple of years. We changed it for Congressman Thompson, and we're changing it this year because normally we would be having it this week. However, with the school schedules changing, it would have fallen on someone's graduation.
Oh.
And it was like, we can't coincide with graduation as much as we would have liked it to flow into Juneteenth. So we're doing it on a Sunday night this year on June 29th, 6 p.m. at our mainstay, Ocean Beach, because this is New London and we have it at Ocean Beach. Our keynote speaker this year is Ronell Higgins, who is the commissioner of, we just say public safety, but the title is Commissioner of Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection. So he is the keynote speaker, and we are keeping it simple this year. This seems to be the year for everything to go simple. So we only have 3 awardees this year. Dr. Aram DeCoven, who is formerly the Chief Culture and Climate Officer of the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. I say formally because, as you know, our president has gotten rid of anything that he thinks DEI related, not realizing DEI is good, not bad. But they also the courts overturned that. So a lot of these people who are no longer working are technically out on administrative leaves. So Aaron falls kind of into that thing. He's not working, but he's not necessarily fired anymore. He's in limbo. But he has been a great resource for our community and Southeastern Connecticut in that he has brought speakers like Ibrahim Kennedy to Connecticut College, Dr. Daryl Wang Su, who talks about microaggressions, my all-time favorite from What Would You Do, ABC, John Quinones, also. So he's brought these people here to speak. Dondre Whitfield came and spoke at the Coast Guard Academy. And it's even more important for us to acknowledge Aaron because this would have been the 50th anniversary year of Eclipse, which is the week they have all the affinity councils are celebrating 50 years, and that got canceled. And the keynote speaker for Eclipse Week was supposed to be Congressman Benny Thompson. That got canceled. So Aaron is one of our speakers. We have a veteran this year, Dr. Stanley Beckford, who's an academic advisor at Three Rivers Community College, also with the Masons. And then we have a police chief also this year, Chief David Burton, chief of the police of the Groton City Police Department, who is from here originally, left for many years, came back. And once he came back, he really jumped into the community and he really jumped into working with the New London NAACP, being a partner with us. So those are our 3 that I can speak of. And who knows, there might be some prizes.
Yeah. Wow.
There might be a surprise or 2 there.
Now, in the last minute or two, what would you uh, recommend people who want to be supportive or get involved do? How would they get in touch with you, and what kind of ways could they support your organizations?
We have a Facebook page. We have a website. You can contact us through that, and our secretary will get back to you. We always have some initiative going on. We're big right now on making sure that our public schools have diverse books. So every year we do a big Black History Month drop where we buy History Month materials for all the students in the elementary schools. This year we did Groton, New London, and Waterford. A lot of students. Posters for the high school and the middle schoolers. And one year we did Native American books, indigenous people books. So we want to continue doing that. We have our youth council. We always like to take our students places, so people can donate to our youth council, help us take our kids to, conventions. National conventions are a big thing because it's a real learning opportunity for them. And it's also because a lot of times our youth don't get to leave New London. So to be able to take them someplace different and show them Black excellence is really important. Not only us, but there's other organizations too, like the HBCU organization. We want to spread the love, spread it out. We're also working on a grant through URI where they're looking at wind energy and energy justice. We had a community meeting last week. We will be doing another one in the fall, and we will make sure you have that information because you don't have to know anything about it. We want to know what you know, what you think. Mm-hmm. It's not a right or wrong thing. It's what do you know? How is it affecting our community? What do we need to get from it type of thing? And that's a grant which is giving us money so that we are able to go out and do some of our forums, our, making sure the schools have Black History Month materials and books, things like that. So there's always a lot going on.
And what about Connecticut landmarks?
I think that pales in comparison to what I was going to say. However, I think for us, we really, really appreciate volunteer work if we're having events and things of that nature. Also, we really would love it if you would come and work with us. We have a number of historic properties, about 12 historic properties all throughout Connecticut. So not just, in the Southeast region, there are other ones. There's, Butler McCook, Isham Terry, there's Phelps Hathaway, the Hale House. We have quite a few of them. And especially in the Southeast region, not only do we run the Hempsted houses, but we also run the Palmer Warner House in East Haddam and the Amasa Day House in Moodus. So we have a lot of space for our volunteer opportunities. People want to vend at our events or come out and things like that. We also are on Facebook and Instagram. Visit our website, ConnecticutLandmarks.org. A lot going on, lots of events to see, So again, it's not just us, but if I could give one shameless plug for anything that anybody can do for us, continue to research, put your hands in the hat, pick up a New London story, get it out there between us, the Black Heritage Trail, anything like that. We just ask that you guys come out, support the research. And if you find a story that you think is fascinating that we have not discussed, please let us know because what's important to us might not be on our radar yet. It doesn't mean it's not important, but it is something we need to know. And if your family has stories or histories that we haven't heard yet, I think every detail is important. I think, if you can't make a quilt without multiple pieces of fabric, right? So you have to have all those pieces. I think you need a couple different fabric squares and some really, really new things. So new hands, and we always need additional sets of eyes for these types of things. So those are the things I think that people can do to help us. If you want to come help out at Juneteenth, let one of us know. You can message us on Facebook, Instagram, or via our email, which is on our website. And more than anything, Ron, I just want to thank you for having us on the show tonight.
Well, thank you both. Getting all three of us busy people, plus the studio all together was not easy, but it was worth it. And we'll be bumping into each other quite a bit over the next few weeks. And I wanted to thank you for making time for it. So we'll see you around New London.
Thank you.
Thank you.